Hi, I'm Dr. Eduardo Arellano, Associate Professor of Higher Education Leadership at the University of Texas at El Paso.
Hi, my name is Eric Murillo, and I'm an instructional designer with the UTEP Center for Instructional Design. Our presentation is called Student Engagement a la HyFlex Mode. So for today's session, we will be giving HyFlex strategies for student engagement before a class session begins. So before you even go to a classroom, before you get into a classroom, we will discuss during the class session and after a class session.
So in terms of strategies that you should implement before a class session, of course you want to provide the readings that you want to focus on at least a week before. You should also provide students with a list of discussion questions or a reading guide that they can refer to as they're doing their reading so that they can be prepared for the class session. In addition, you might want to consider offering participation points for questions that they themselves might have as they're doing the reading, asking them to email those questions to you at least a day before you have class, so that gives you at least one day to prepare to address those questions within a session. You can also assign a writing assignment, such as a reflective essay, on one or more of those discussion questions that you've assigned, so that the students will then use that reflective essay as a springboard during your session and your discussions. Of course, you want to share any presentation slides or videos or other course materials for a session at least a week before, in addition to the readings and the discussion questions.
One of the best ways to engage with students is synchronous classes via Teams or Zoom. So this allows you to have real-time connections with students. But given the nature of HyFlex classes, it's also a good idea to record your class and make sure it's available for students to engage with later. Given that you've had reflective assignments before coming into class, when students get in class, it's always a good idea to ask some of them to share what they've written about. So this allows us to get deeper conversations with the students in our course. And some of the other tools and methods that we use are icebreakers, polling, and breakout groups. With icebreakers, this allows instructors and students to make connections in an environment that's a little bit less stressful, and it allows students to make connections with their instructor. Polling is done during class, so you can have polling sessions during your lectures that allow you to gauge students' interest or connection, and it allows you to understand where students are with your lecture. And breakout groups are another tool that is effective. This can be done in face-to-face or online settings, but it allows for deeper, smaller conversations within your course. One of the ways that we can also engage with our students is using tools like Google Forms, where we can provide feedback on a student's assignment, or students can comment on each other's work as well. But this allows for these connections to be made even before you get to your next class. Fishbowl exercises, again, could be done in the face-to-face or an online setting, but this allows for one student to be the focal point and to answer questions, and the rest of the students can be silent and listening and basically let the student dig deeper into the subject. And then there's a follow-up portion where you're able to connect with the rest of the class after the student answers the question. And finally, gamification is a new trend that we're seeing in online and hybrid learning. And so tools like Kahoot help you have a competitive element to your lectures where students can answer questions and keep track of who's doing well, and you perhaps can offer incentives for students to do well. And Classcraft is something familiar to a lot of gamers in the sense that it uses Minecraft or similar type gaming experiences where users and students can create a profile and they have to unlock certain rewards by continuing with the program.
In terms of strategies that you can implement after a session, since you've recorded your session, you want to share that video recording as soon as possible. What's ideal is to do it the day after. That way students can watch the video recording and you can require them to react and make reference to the video recording in an online asynchronous discussion forum. In addition, you might want to consider using your discussion questions as independent individual discussion threads that students can respond to. In terms of engaging with the students after a session, you want to require students to make the initial post at least within a day or two after your session, and then ask them to make another post, at least a second post, in reaction to either something that a classmate posted or you as the instructor in reflection to something that's been posted from the first 2 days. You can require them to make a second post at least 3 or 4 days after a session. Now, you might have also, incorporated chat during your session. So what I would encourage you to do is to save those chat comments or those questions in the chat if you didn't address them during the session. Review those, and you can actually try to incorporate those into the asynchronous discussions, including, by the way, addressing questions that you didn't get to address during your session. And lastly, of course, you want to provide timely feedback on those essays that students have written. And of course, you also want to be available virtually to students through your office hours in case they have any questions after a session.
Thank you for your time and attention. If you'd like to learn more about HyFlex or any of the strategies we covered, we encourage you to enroll in our HyFlex course in the fall of 2023. It is a self-paced course, and you can email us at instructionaldesign@utep.edu.
At this point, I'd like to ask all of you if there are any questions that you have for us.
And it looks like we have one in the chat. What is your experience with student compliance in terms of preparation for class? A lot of strategies are predicated on students getting ready. Yes.
Right.
I'd love to hear what you have to say on that.
So let me preface by saying that I only teach graduate students, so typically that isn't an issue. However, I don't like to assume.
We're losing you a bit there, Eric.
Questions per chapter or per reading. No. I'm sorry. As I was saying, what I try to do is to share with my students a list of 3 to 5 very specific discussion questions, so that it's almost nearly impossible for them to be how do I want to say this? Well, it makes it so that it compels them to read, to be ready for the next class. I don't know if Eric uses some other strategies to make sure they are prepared.
Really, I think it's difficult to get that result, but I think a lot of communication with students before the class begins. Sometimes people have a quiz or another method of testing communication just to make sure that, first of all, students are able to log into the LMS, access your materials, that sort of thing. So I think engaging students prior to the course beginning and finding ways to get feedback is helpful, so that at least there is some back and forth communication.
As I was listening to Eric, I would also add that, and I mentioned this in the presentation too, right? So that they can own their education, I do give them credit if they send me a question that they have about the reading, and all they have to do is send me an email, and I let them know that is considered discussion, so that they can feel a sense of ownership. And in fact, when I have a class session, I usually start with their questions first, and that really motivates the students. And then the other strategy that I use, generally speaking, is I assess students early from the very beginning. I have a pre-assessment, for example, and I assess often also throughout the semester, whether it's through discussion questions that they want to ask me, whether it's discussions in the sessions or after the sessions, and also the reflective essays on top of major projects that they might have. Other questions?
Looks like there's one more in the chat. How do you address concerns from students or instructors, guest lecturers regarding academic freedom and integrity? Not having the recorded experience, etc., shared to those outside the classroom audience.
So at the University of Texas at El Paso, we do have I guess what you could call a template policy, right? Where in essence, the students, and we use that policy in our syllabi. And the policy does, inform the students that they are not to share any video recordings, and they are also told that anything that is shared in the class is confidential. I know that I do that in my syllabus. And, in fact, I tell them whatever is said in this classroom stays in this classroom, because I want them to feel comfortable sharing, their perspectives. There are guidelines that I also share in terms of our discussion, both guidelines while I have them either face-to-face or virtual, and also guidelines for the asynchronous discussions. And again, to give them ownership, I invite them to suggest additional guidelines that they might have. And I would be glad to share my syllabi with any one of you, so you could see, the boiler template that our university uses as far as not sharing video recordings. And I can share also my specific guidelines in terms of either the face-to-face, virtual, or online discussions. So those are some of the strategies that I use. I don't know if Eric has any additional ones.
Well, just from an instructional designer's perspective, some LMS do allow you to prevent students from sharing video, but with technology today, it's not foolproof. So there's other methods I'm sure that students can figure out, but those are always options, and it's kind of like a back and forth with technology. Something figures out how to, read Chat GPT, something else figures out how to go around it. So we're always in a constant struggle with some of these aspects.
As I was listening to Eric, there's a couple of other strategies that I thought about. One is to develop questions that really are personal in nature. For example, I teach educational leadership in higher education. So one of the beginning questions that I ask, a pre-assessment question that I ask, is what does educational leadership mean to you? So it's very difficult, to cheat on that, if you will. I ask them for their personal philosophy, and I ask them to give me examples of how they bring that philosophy to mind. And then in many of my courses, I give them a problem that they are to address within their unit, and they need to share the evidence of that problem and provide different solutions. So I try to use assessments that are not your typical multiple choice or essay questions. I try to create assessments that are real life scenarios where they're dealing with actual problems in their work.
Just to follow up on that, I think that's great. Anything that is something that lets the students buy in by telling their story is going to be a useful engagement tool. And it also helps with pre-assessment. I've done exercises. I teach sociology generally. And so a lot of the questions I have going into a class for students are, for them to address some of the local, national or global issues, right? What are some things that they're concerned about? And so it helps me understand where students are. So how do they view the world? How do they view, their local situation? And it also helps me understand more or less what's going on in their world, what they're concerned with. So in those processes, I think I'm able to, distinguish one student from another.
And I would thank you both very much. We will have to wrap up the session. I'm so sorry we had technical issues in the beginning, but if we could have a round of applause for our speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And as I said, anybody interested in receiving any of my materials, I'd be glad to share them with you. You can just reach out to me through Huba, and our contact information is on the presentation slides, in addition to the academy that we have on HyFlex teaching, which would be available to any of you for free through UTEP. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
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 Hi, I'm Lacey. I'm an assistant professor at Harper College for the sonography programs, and today I'm going to tell you about my experience piloting HyFlex in our ultrasound programs. Why? Because if we can have telemedicine, why not telemedicine education? Our objectives for today: demonstrate how HyFlex can be incorporated into a skills-based course in a health careers field, outline the importance of content delivery to ensure success of flexible learning, and finally discuss the benefits that students experience in offering health careers courses in a flexible modality. The mission to create change started because we noticed a pattern of stress and anxiety in our students. Many health career fields have a rigorous curriculum. Students log on average 10 or more hours for a 2 credit hour course in our lab. Now add in a full course load. Students average 30 or more hours per week studying and practicing lab activities. Student perceived stress is high, morale and confidence is low. Then let's add in students that have extracurricular responsibilities, kids, sports, family, jobs. These all created an unhealthy school life balance. The program was not meeting all students where they needed, and our retention rates reflected this. The inspiration to create change came from a friend of mine who created and launched a tablet-based radiology residency program in Haiti. Here is a picture of the first group of residents with all of their tablets. Now, the idea wasn't entirely original. As a matter of fact, a large organization was already attempting to do something similar. But where they failed was by not addressing the challenges of the residents. To load just one CAT scan would take all of the internet data that was allowed to them for the month. This one limitation alone prevented the residents from being able to participate in the resources available. Now, my friend, by listening to their challenges, took these tablets, uploaded all of the program materials that was needed, and created virtual meetings that allowed for synchronous learning. This program is still being used in other countries now, and it's a successful program. And so I thought, why can't we take this same concept and bring it to our program? Now, as you know, change isn't easy. Luckily, I had a pandemic on my side. So COVID forced our program online, and I used this as an opportunity to see if the concept would work for us as well. A few things that I have learned since the beginning. First, collaborate with your Faculty Development Center. Their guidance and resources have been vital to the success of this. They may not know my specialty specifically, but when we work together, we can come up with some really cool options, and they can then take those options and apply it to other programs. Next, make it easy for the students to follow. The easier it is for the students to use, the more likely they're going to use it, and they're going to use all of the resources that you've given to them. How do you get started? Think inside and outside the box. Take those activities that you've already been doing with your students and start there. It's an easy way to move into the process of bringing your courses into a more virtual world. And finally, ask the students for help. They're the ones using it. If they have a problem, they would love to share it with you. And so when you take those problems and you adapt it right in the middle of the process, in the middle of the course, then they can tell you what's working and what's not working so that you can finish the semester strong, and they really feel as though you care about their user experience. Welcome to our sonography lab. Let me take you on a quick tour of one of our activities. This here is Miss Bones, and Miss Bones is having a baby. So we're gonna scan her in our lab. The first thing that we'll do is set up a tripod. This tripod will hold a cell phone that is pointed at her abdomen, and this will allow those watching from the back of the room or watching from home the ability to see where the hand is being placed as the images are being obtained. Now the student who is scanning Miss Bones can see this 9-week fetus and the tiny details, but those at the back of the room can't appreciate these tiny details. So we connected the ultrasound machine up to our smart podium using the appropriate cables for each. This allows us to then project the image up onto the big screen at the front of our room. Now those at the back of the class can see the level of detail that the scanner can see. Now from here, we share this screen using WebEx and we record it. This allows synchronous and asynchronous viewing for our students from home. But you can use any type of a meeting platform that also allows recording. Now in the future, we'll be adding a third camera, and this third camera will be pointing down at this keyboard here to allow students to be able to see which buttons are being pressed at what times in order to obtain and optimize the images of the study. Now this type of an exam can be used for numerous modalities, so get creative and give it a try. Now here is the view from home. So the student who is at home can see multiple screens. Now you can set this up in various ways. We've got one cell phone that is actually pointed here. This was actually not a cell phone, but a camera that was pointed at the screen. And then here we have a third camera. So if I had set up another cell phone, I could have had this pointing down at that keyboard panel of the machine. Here's another view. Because we're still new at this, we've been trying out some different formats to see what works best for us. So for this one, we had the ultrasound machine connected directly up to the smart podium, so it gave us a really crisp image of that baby. And then we had a cell phone pointing down on the mom's belly, and then we had another camera that was looking at the classroom so that we could also lecture, and any drawings, I could zoom the camera up onto the board at the front of the class so that I could do any drawings or anything like that. But here, depending on the activity that you're doing, this could be set up with cell phones, tablets, and laptops. So really you can get very creative as long as everything is able to get onto WebEx or whatever your meeting recording platform is. Let me quickly show you how I set up my course materials in our learning management system. This is a template that was created by our Faculty Development Center that we have used. Per student feedback, having materials easy to access and follow is pivotal to alleviating stress and anxiety for those students. So here you will see I have all of the weeks lined out for the entire semester. We start off with an intro video from me that kind of explains what this course is all about and what HyFlex really means. Now I'd like to jump down here and open up this tab, this Week 10 tab. You'll see it begins with an overview of that week. All of the materials that the student will need for this week is housed in the one tab for that week, so there's no jumping around that they need to do. In this module overview, you can see what our topic is for the week, what activities they'll need to do, any important due dates, their HyFlex session information, and an outlook to anything that might be coming up, a project, a test, anything like that. Now, when they jump over to the activities, they have any videos or lecture material that they need to review before they see me for their flexible learning session. And any lectures that they need to listen to, I've put down how long those lectures are so that they know exactly how much time they need to carve out in order to dedicate their thoughts to that one lecture. Now let me bounce over to the HyFlex session. Everything for the HyFlex session is located in that one tab. Again, still all housed in the 1 week. So this was our session 4. Here you can see that this is the link for those who are watching synchronously from home. They can jump into that lecture. If they want to come in live, they know the day, the time, and the room number. If you're watching asynchronously, then here is where you'll find the recorded session. So after we've finished with the WebEx meeting, it comes to my email and I can post that video here for everybody to review. Now, we also use a picture archiving system, and so all of those images are located here so that the student can review the images alone without the actual video. They find the worksheet that they need to complete their assignment while they're either doing this in class, synchronously, or asynchronously, and then right here they also have the tab to submit that assignment. And now, because this was a pilot study, we were tracking attendance. And so again, right here in this same shell is where they would track their attendance for the course. Now, I've received numerous compliments about this layout and how easy it is for the students to follow. This was a template that our Faculty Development Center had created for us to use, but I love it. And ever since I started it, I've now put this into every single one of my classes because it's not only easy for the students, but I get less emails, so it's also easier for me. All right, thank you. So with everything we've so far discussed, what do the students think?
Hi, my name is Kelly. I am a current student in the OBGYN sonography theory. We used HyFlex this semester, and this is just a quick testimonial as to how it worked for me and what the benefits were for me. A little background on who I am. I am a returning student after having a prior career. So I have a family and I have 3 children. So for me, the HyFlex gave me a lot of flexibility in how I was able to attend. We had 3 choices in our attendance. We could do it in person. We could in person at the school. We could join in person on video live, and then we also could watch it recorded later. And for a person that has other commitments outside of school, like work or children or family, it was really beneficial to be able to tailor those classes to what I needed on a week-to-week basis. Professor Gander gave us the option of attending whatever way we would like each time there was a HyFlex session. So for me, I did 2 in person. I did 1 where I watched it after the fact. And I also did 1 where I was in video in live. So I was at home and watching it live. And that's the one I really want to talk about, because without that option, I would have missed that class that day. I had a sick child, and it allowed for me to be home with him while he was sleeping, but still not miss an opportunity for a live hands-on environment where I could see that anatomy scan that we were doing that day. So for us in that class, we scanned people that were pregnant, and that is a complex skill to learn for sonography. I think you can study the textbooks and you can see what the anatomy is that you're looking for, but without actually getting your hands on a patient or seeing it scanned live, it's very hard to connect as to where you need to go on the mother's belly in order to see the baby the best. So having a HyFlex session that I could be at home and watch live really allowed for me to interact still with the class and actually see what that sonographer who was scanning was actually doing externally on the mother's abdomen. And then also, though, having the option of watching and recording later, even not at the time of the live presentation, allowed for me to schedule it around my family's schedule and watch it late at night if I needed to when my kids were asleep. So for me, I believe the HyFlex is a huge benefit. And honestly, without it, I would have really struggled in that class this semester. So in recommendation for any student that might be looking into a class with a HyFlex, I would highly recommend it. It gave me the opportunity to really tailor my education to what my family needs or what my personal needs were, and not miss a beat in regards to any kind of lab activity or anything else. So that's really it. I think it's a wonderful opportunity that Harper allowed for me to be part of, and I would highly recommend it for any future student. Even if you plan on going to every single one, it's neat to have your team be there on video behind you and still present, even though they may not physically be present. Thank you.
So since starting flexible learning, students have been less stressed. They like to have the recorded materials that can be revisited when preparing for an exam. And for my courses in particular, a majority of my students like to complete their material asynchronously because they can put it into the middle of their lunch break or whenever their family needs allow them to visit the material. So in conclusion, when thinking about meeting your course objectives, remember the following. Education is not one size fits all, because life isn't one size fits all. To ensure that all students have the same opportunities for success, regardless of their extracurricular activities, we must look beyond the traditional learning environments. It is a challenge to get started, but when you collaborate with your colleagues, you can create some really excellent resources. And finally, remember who this is all for. All the hard work pays off when you see a student who never had the ability to succeed graduate and provide a better life for themselves and their family. Thank you.
All right, thank you to Patricia Lacey Gander. Are you here to answer a few questions? Do you want to start your video? We have a moment or two before the next session starts.
I'll just mention too, the great part about having a video, like for the kind of things that are happening in this session and any of the sessions that you have where we have technical problems, having a video on standby. So let's say if everything didn't work at all, we know for sure that there is a video sitting in Whova. And then that same idea sitting within our learning management systems, within Canvas or Blackboard or any of the type of systems that you have, kind of help just in case that synchronous session doesn't work at all. Like the internet there's a catastrophic failure of internet. You can go back and watch the video. I think you have multiple backups just in case things happen.
And we do have a question in the chat. We're hoping that our speaker can still get in for a moment, but we are running out of time here. So keep in mind that we have a lot of interactive possibilities available through the Whova system that you can follow up in other ways. And yes, Brooke, that is what I always say is it isn't a tech talk if there's not a tech issue. So we just have to get used to thinking on the fly, which isn't always comfortable. Well, I think we will close this session then, since the next one starts in 2 minutes. And I hope that if you have questions that you will contact our speaker directly, and I'm sure she'll be happy to answer those. I support our School of Nursing, so this was particularly interesting for me to see this used in a medical presentation. So thank you so much.